Life had always been relatively simple for me. My name's Tom, and I'm a 42-year-old graphic designer based in Austin, Texas. I've been married to Emma, 40, for about 15 years. We don't have kids, which always seemed to work out fine for both of us. Our lives were intertwined in the quiet suburban streets, where neighbors waved hello and barbecues were a common weekend occurrence. Emma is a real estate agent, known for her charming personality and sharp wit. She's the kind of woman who can walk into a room and instantly become the center of attention, a trait that both attracted me to her and sometimes made me uneasy. Our home, a cozy 2-story house with a small garden out back, was our sanctuary. We had shared dreams and laughter, and I thought we were genuinely happy. Our neighborhood is a blend of young professionals and older couples who have seen the area evolve over the years. There's a park nearby where we used to take evening strolls, a quaint coffee shop where we'd spend lazy Sunday mornings, and a tight-knit community that always felt like an extended family. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, and secrets were hard to keep. Work had been going well for both of us. I had just landed a significant project with a local startup, and Emma's real estate career was booming. We had our ups and downs, like any couple, but nothing that ever felt insurmountable. At least, that's what I thought until the day everything changed. The day I realized that the life I had been living was nothing but a carefully constructed illusion. It all started innocently enough, with small changes that were easy to dismiss. But soon, those small changes snowballed into something much darker and more painful. Looking back, there were signs I should have noticed, whispers of betrayal that I chose to ignore. But hindsight is always clearer. And at the time, I was blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to engulf my life. It all began with subtle changes in Emma's behavior. She started staying out late more often, explaining it away with work commitments and client meetings. At first, I didn't think much of it. Real estate can be unpredictable, and late showings or meetings with clients were part of the job. But soon, her excuses started to feel rehearsed, her demeanor more distant. One evening I was tidying up our bedroom when I accidentally knocked over a shoebox under the bed. As I bent down to pick it up, I noticed something out of place. There, partially hidden beneath the bed, was a used condom filled with white liquid. My heart sank. This was not something I had put there, and the implications were immediate and devastating. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the condom in disbelief. My mind raced with questions and scenarios, each one worse than the last. Could it be possible that Emma was cheating on me? The thought was almost too painful to consider. But the evidence was right there in front of me, undeniable and damning. I didn't confront Emma immediately. Instead, I decided to gather more information. I needed to know the truth before I could face her. I knew that confronting her without solid evidence could lead to denial and more lies. So I took a deep breath and made a plan. The next day, while Emma was out, I went to the electronics store and bought a few small discrete cameras. They were easy to hide and had excellent resolution, perfect for my needs. I installed them in strategic locations around the house, the living room, the hallway, and of course, our bedroom. With the cameras set up, I felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation. I needed to know the truth, but I also feared what I might find. A few days later, I decided to test my suspicions. I told Emma I had to go on a business trip to Dallas for a couple of days. She barely reacted, which only fueled my anxiety. I checked into a nearby hotel, bringing my laptop with me. The plan was to monitor the cameras remotely and catch her in the act if she was indeed cheating. As I settled into the hotel room, I felt a knot in my stomach. This was it, the moment of truth. That evening, around 8 p.m., I saw Emma come home through the camera feed. She was on her phone, laughing and talking animatedly. A few minutes later, the front door opened again, and a man walked in. My heart pounded in my chest as I recognized him. David, one of Emma's colleagues. They had always seemed friendly, but I had never suspected anything beyond that. I watched in stunned silence as they moved to the living room. Emma poured them both drinks, and they sat close, too close, on the couch. The flirtation was obvious, their body language intimate. I felt a sickening mix of anger and betrayal well up inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed to see this through. Soon their flirting escalated. They started kissing passionately, and before long their clothes were discarded. They stumbled into our bedroom, and I watched in horror as they had sex on our bed. My bed. The place that had been a symbol of our love and trust. Every second felt like an eternity. I could feel my blood boiling, my fists clenching involuntarily. But I knew I couldn't just sit there and watch. I had to confront them, to make them face the consequences of their actions. I grabbed my car keys and drove back to the house, my mind a blur of rage and heartbreak. When I arrived, I burst through the front door, barely containing my fury. I could hear them still in the throes of passion as I stormed up the stairs. I kicked the bedroom door open, and they both froze, eyes wide with shock and fear. "What the hell is going on here?" I shouted, my voice shaking with anger. David scrambled to get off the bed, but I was on him in an instant. I grabbed him by the collar and threw him against the wall. "You think you can just come into my house and fuck my wife?" I roared, landing a punch squarely on his jaw. He tried to fight back, but I was too enraged to feel any of his hits. I punched him, again and again, until he was a crumpled mess on the floor, barely conscious. Emma screamed, trying to pull me away, but I shoved her aside. "You think you can do this to me?" I spat at her, my voice thick with betrayal. "You think you can just lie and cheat and get away with it?" She was crying now, her face a mix of fear and guilt. "Tom, please." "I can explain," she started, but I cut her off. "Explain? There's nothing to explain, Emma. I saw everything," I yelled, pointing to the hidden camera in the corner of the room. "I saw you with him in our bed. How could you do this to me?" She sank to the floor, sobbing, but I couldn't bring myself to feel any sympathy. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I looked down at David, who was groaning in pain, and felt a grim sense of satisfaction. "Get out," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Both of you, get the hell out of my house." David staggered to his feet, pulling on his clothes as quickly as he could. Emma followed, her sobs filling the silence as they left. I watched them go, feeling a hollow emptiness settle in my chest. The life I thought I had was shattered, and there was no going back. As the door closed behind them, I sank to the floor, the weight of what had just happened crashing down on me. My marriage was over, my trust destroyed, and all that was left was the painful reality of betrayal. After they left, the house felt eerily quiet. I was alone with my thoughts, replaying the scene over and over in my mind. The rage that had fueled me during the confrontation began to dissipate, replaced by a deep, gnawing pain. I knew I had to confront Emma again, but this time I needed answers. I needed to understand why she had done this to me. I spent the night on the couch, unable to sleep. The next morning I called Emma. She answered on the third ring, her voice hesitant and filled with guilt. "Tom," she began, but I cut her off. "We need to talk. Come home now." There was a long pause before she finally agreed. "I'll be there in an hour." When Emma arrived, she looked a mess. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, and she seemed smaller somehow, diminished. She stood in the doorway, unsure whether to come in. I motioned for her to sit on the couch, and she did so gingerly, like she was afraid it might collapse under her. For a few minutes we sat in silence, the weight of the previous night's events hanging heavy between us. Finally, I broke the silence. "Why, Emma? Why did you do it?" She looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously in her lap. "I don't know, Tom. I was lonely. You were always working, always busy with your projects. I felt neglected, unimportant." "Neglected?" I snapped, my voice rising. "I was working to provide for us, to give us a good life. And this is how you repay me?" Tears streamed down her face, but I was too angry to feel any sympathy. "I know," she whispered. "I know I messed up. But David was there, and he listened. He made me feel wanted." "David!" I spat the name like it was poison. "David's a piece of shit, and so are you for doing this to me." She flinched at my words, but I pressed on. "How long has this been going on, Emma? How long have you been cheating on me?" She took a shaky breath. "About 6 months. It started as just talking, but it turned into more. I'm so sorry, Tom." "Sorry?" I laughed bitterly. "Sorry doesn't cut it, Emma. You destroyed our marriage. You broke my trust. How am I supposed to get past that?" She didn't have an answer. She just sat there, crying softly. The sight of her tears, which once would have broken my heart, now only fueled my anger. "I want a divorce," I said finally. The words felt like lead in my mouth, heavy and final. Emma's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. "Tom, please don't. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can—" "No," I interrupted. "There's no coming back from this. You made your choice and now you have to live with it." She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. "Don't," I said coldly. "Just don't." For a long time we sat in silence, the reality of the situation sinking in. Finally, Emma stood up, wiping her eyes. "I'll pack some things and go stay with my sister," she said quietly. I nodded, unable to look at her. As she moved around the house, gathering her belongings, I felt a strange sense of detachment. This was the woman I had loved, the woman I had shared my life with. And now she was just a stranger. When she was done, she paused at the door, looking back at me. "I'm so sorry, Tom," she whispered. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just watched as she walked out of the door, taking the remnants of our life together with her. As the door closed behind her, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. The confrontation was over, but the pain was just beginning. I knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but at least I had taken the first step. The truth was out, and now I could start the painful process of healing. The days following Emma's departure were a haze of anger and sorrow. I was consumed by thoughts of betrayal, and the pain seemed to intensify with each passing hour. The more I thought about what she had done, the more I felt the need for retribution. I couldn't just let her walk away unscathed after destroying everything we had built together. The idea came to me one sleepless night, as I stared at the ceiling, replaying the events over and over in my mind. I remembered the cameras I had installed. I had the footage of her and David, undeniable evidence of their affair. The thought of exposing them, of making them feel a fraction of the humiliation I felt, began to take root in my mind. The next morning, I downloaded the footage from the cameras onto my laptop. As I watched the video again, my anger solidified into a cold, determined resolve. I edited the footage, ensuring that every incriminating moment was clear. I didn't want there to be any doubt about what they had done. Once the video was ready, I created a fake email account and began sending the footage to everyone who mattered in Emma and David's lives. I sent it to their friends, their families, their colleagues. I even sent it to Emma's boss in the HR department at her company. I wanted everyone to see the truth, to know what kind of people they really were. The backlash was immediate. Within hours, my phone was buzzing with messages and calls from friends and family, expressing shock and disbelief. I ignored them all, my focus solely on the fallout I had set in motion. Emma was the first to call. When I didn't answer, she flooded my inbox with messages, pleading for me to stop. She begged for my forgiveness, claimed that this would ruin her life, that she would lose everything. I didn't care. I was beyond compassion, driven by a desire for justice. Next came David. His messages were filled with threats and curses, but I knew he was powerless. The damage was done. His reputation was in tatters, his personal and professional life crumbling around him. A few days later, I got a call from Emma's boss, a stern woman named Karen. She informed me that Emma had been suspended pending an investigation. She didn't say much else, but I could hear the disdain in her voice. I knew Emma's career was effectively over. I learned through mutual friends that David had been fired from his job. His wife had kicked him out, and he was now living with a friend, desperately trying to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. The satisfaction I felt was cold and fleeting, but it was something. Emma showed up at the house a week after the video leaked. She looked exhausted, her face drawn and pale. "Tom, please," she started, her voice trembling. "You've done enough. You've destroyed my life. Please stop." I stared at her, unmoved. "Destroyed your life? Emma, you destroyed mine. You made your bed, and now you have to lie in it." Tears streamed down her face, but I felt nothing. The woman standing before me was a stranger, someone who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. "I lost my job," she whispered. "David lost his too. His wife left him. Everyone knows, Tom. I can't even show my face in public." "Good," I said coldly. "Now you know how it feels to be humiliated, to have everything taken from you." She sank to her knees, sobbing. "I'm so sorry, Tom. I wish I could take it all back. I never meant for any of this to happen." It's too late for apologies, Emma. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences. She cried for a long time, but I stood there, impassive. Eventually, she gathered herself and left, her shoulders hunched in defeat. As the door closed behind her, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. I had gotten my revenge. I had exposed them for what they were, and they were paying the price. But as the days turned into weeks, the satisfaction began to fade, replaced by a hollow emptiness. Revenge had given me a temporary sense of justice, but it hadn't healed the wound in my heart. The betrayal still hurt, and the loneliness was overwhelming. I realized that while I had punished Emma and David, I hadn't truly moved on. I was still stuck in the past, reliving the pain over and over. It was time to focus on myself, to find a way to heal and rebuild my life. Revenge had been sweet, but it was not the solution. It was time to look forward, to let go of the anger and find a way to move on. After the fallout from the video, the next logical step was to file for divorce. The thought of staying married to Emma, even in name only, was unbearable. I needed a clean break, a definitive end to the chapter of my life that had been marred by her betrayal. I called up my lawyer, Sarah, and set an appointment to discuss the divorce proceedings. Sarah was tough, compassionate, and had a reputation for being relentless in the courtroom. I knew she was the right person to handle this for me. When I arrived at her office, she greeted me with a firm handshake and a reassuring smile. "Tom, I'm so sorry you're going through this," she said as we sat down. "Let's make sure we get you the best possible outcome." We went over the details, our assets, the house, our finances, and how to approach the divorce. Given the circumstances, Sarah advised that we pursue a divorce on the grounds of adultery, which would work in my favor both in terms of alimony and division of assets. "Emma's affair gives us a strong case," Sarah explained. "We'll aim for a fair division of property, and you might even be able to get spousal support given that she's the primary breadwinner." The process was set in motion quickly. Papers were drafted, and Emma was served. The day she received the divorce papers, she showed up at the house, her face a mask of desperation and anger. "Tom, you can't do this!" she yelled as she stormed into the living room. "You're really going to divorce me?" "Yes, Emma, I am," I said firmly, not letting her see the turmoil inside me. "You destroyed our marriage. This is the only way forward." Her expression softened, and she tried to appeal to my emotions. "Tom, please, we can work this out. We don't have to go through with this. Think of all the years we've spent together." I shook my head. "Emma, you had your chance to save our marriage, and you threw it away. This is the only way I can move on." For a moment, she looked like she was going to argue more, but then she sighed and sat down on the couch. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "We let the lawyers handle it," I replied. "We'll have to figure out the division of assets, the house, everything." The divorce process was grueling. Emma fought hard, trying to salvage what she could, but Sarah was relentless. We met for mediation sessions, each one more painful than the last. Emma would vacillate between anger and tears, but I remained resolute. This was the only path to reclaiming my life. One particularly contentious issue was the house. Emma wanted to keep it, arguing that she had put a lot of effort into making it our home. But for me, the house was filled with too many painful memories. I didn't want it. I wanted to sell it and move on. During one mediation session, Emma finally broke down. "Tom, I need this house," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I have nowhere else to go. You've already taken everything from me." I felt a pang of guilt, but I knew I couldn't let her manipulate me. "Emma, this house is a reminder of everything that went wrong. I can't stay here, and I don't want it. We need to sell it and split the proceeds." In the end, she agreed, though reluctantly. We divided our assets fairly, and I received a portion of her income as spousal support for a few years, given that my career had suffered during the marriage. The day the divorce was finalized, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I was free from the bonds of a broken marriage, but the reality of it still hurt. Emma and I had shared so much, and it was all gone, reduced to legal documents and divided assets. We met one last time to sign the final papers. Emma looked tired, her face lined with regret. "I'm sorry it had to end this way," she said softly. "Me too," I replied, meaning it. Despite everything, a part of me still mourned the end of what we had once shared. With the divorce finalized, I moved out of the house and into a small apartment across town. It was a fresh start, a blank slate where I could begin to rebuild my life without the shadow of betrayal hanging over me. The weeks that followed were a time of reflection and healing. I threw myself into my work, started going to the gym regularly, and reconnected with old friends. I even began seeing a therapist, someone who helped me process the pain and begin to move forward. One day, as I was unpacking boxes in my new apartment, I came across a photo album from happier times. I hesitated, then opened it, flipping through the pages. The memories were bittersweet, but they also reminded me of the person I had been before all of this happened. I realized that I could still be that person again, stronger and wiser for the experience. Life was different now, but it was my own. I was no longer defined by Emma's betrayal. I was moving on, step by step, towards a future that held new possibilities. The divorce was the end of one chapter, but it was also the beginning of another, one where I could find happiness and peace on my own terms. The first few months after the divorce were challenging, but they also offered me a chance to focus on myself. I realized that the path to healing wasn't just about moving on from Emma, but also about rediscovering who I was and who I wanted to be. I decided to make some significant changes, starting with my physical health. I joined a gym not far from my apartment and committed to a regular workout routine. It wasn't just about getting fit, it was about reclaiming my body and my confidence. The physical exertion helped clear my mind, and the progress I saw in the mirror was a constant reminder of my strength and resilience. In addition to the gym, I started running in the mornings. Austin's many trails and parks provided the perfect backdrop for my new routine. Each run felt like a small victory, a step away from the pain and towards a healthier, more fulfilling life. The rhythmic pounding of my feet on the pavement became a form of therapy, a way to process my thoughts and emotions. But physical health was only part of the equation. I also needed to work on my mental and emotional well-being. Therapy became a cornerstone of my self-improvement journey. My therapist, Dr. Mason, was patient and understanding, helping me navigate the complex feelings of anger, betrayal, and sadness. Through our sessions, I learned to let go of the past and to focus on the present and future. One of the most significant lessons I learned was the importance of self-compassion. I had spent so much time blaming myself for what happened, wondering if there was something I could have done differently. Dr. Mason helped me understand that Emma's actions were her own, and that I couldn't control or change her choices. What I could control was how I responded and how I moved forward. I also made a conscious effort to reconnect with friends and family. During my marriage, especially in the tumultuous final years, I had become somewhat isolated. Now I reached out to old friends, met up for drinks or dinner, and allowed myself to enjoy their company. It was a reminder that I was not alone, that I had a support system of people who cared about me. One weekend I decided to visit my parents. They had been a constant source of support throughout the divorce, and spending time with them felt like a balm to my wounded heart. We spent the weekend reminiscing, laughing, and simply enjoying each other's company. It reminded me of the importance of family and the unconditional love they provided. My creative side also found new outlets. I began dabbling in photography, something I had always been interested in but never had the time to pursue. I started with simple shots around the city, sunsets, street scenes, and the vibrant life that pulsed through Austin. As I improved, I ventured further afield, exploring the beautiful landscapes of Texas. Photography became a form of meditation, a way to see the world through a new lens and find beauty in everyday moments. In my professional life, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor. The project with the local startup became a major success, and my efforts did not go unnoticed. I was offered a promotion, which came with more responsibilities but also greater rewards. My career flourished, and for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely proud of my accomplishments. Socially, I started attending events and gatherings, not with the aim of finding a new relationship, but to expand my horizons and meet new people. I joined a book club, attended local art shows, and even took up cooking classes. These activities not only kept me busy, but also enriched my life in ways I hadn't anticipated. Through all these changes, I began to see myself not as a victim of betrayal, but as a survivor, someone who had faced immense pain and come out stronger on the other side. I realized that my worth was not tied to my marriage or my ex-wife's actions, but to who I was as an individual. One evening, as I sat on the balcony of my apartment, looking out over the city, I felt a sense of peace. The city lights twinkled like stars, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. I had taken control of my life, made positive changes, and was on a path to a better, brighter tomorrow. I knew there would still be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and sadness, but I also knew that I had the strength to face them, to continue growing and improving. My journey was far from over, but I was on the right path, and that was all that mattered. Reflecting on the past year, I realized how far I had come. The pain of Emma's betrayal was still there, but it no longer defined me. I had found new passions, strengthened old relationships, and most importantly, rediscovered myself. As the night wore on and the city quieted down, I felt a sense of gratitude for the lessons learned, the support received, and the new life I was building. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I looked forward to it with hope and excitement. This was my new life, one of self-improvement, growth, and endless possibilities, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms.